Go. Hi, Hildor. How are you?
Great. How are you today?
Good, good. Well, I'm so excited today. We've got a great show lineup, and we're going to be talking about your environment now. And I know this is really close to your heart and very close to everyone's heart because this is how we breathe and this is how we live in community with the environment. But tell folks that don't know you well what your interest is and what we've got lined up for today.
Today, I wanted to really make citizen science the topic of today. Citizen science, if you don't know what that is, it is an effort where lay people, every day, you and me, are contributing data to a database where scientists will then make sense of the data in regional distribution of flora and fauna. So simple observations can actually be very useful to scientists right now as climate is changing. So what happens is, and also behavioral observations can be helpful when we're trying to understand the more than human world, our non-human relatives, if you want. So what I was delighted this week to participate in challenge that is hosted by iNaturalist. I have mentioned that here on the show, inaturalist.org. If you don't have it, then it's a smartphone application where you can just log on and start taking pictures of what you see. And there is a pattern recognition program that helps you identify what you're seeing. And why should we care? Because there is a really serious case of plant blindness going on. Most people don't know the name of plants or trees, and we should really be concerned about that because we rely on the green world to breathe. So there are many reasons why I want to talk about this, but before I get into detail about that, I would like to introduce my friend Max, who came here with me on the show today. And Max, can you
say hi, Max?
Hi. Hi.
So I met Max on one of the nature walks that we were guiding at Sands Point Preserve, and we started talking. David Jakim was guiding that walk with me, and we started talking with Max, and we're like, who is this guy? How does he know all this? And in the end, we thought we better invite him to lead the walk. So now he's guiding the walks. And if I just wanted to share my screen here.
So just so I'm clear, Elder, what you're talking about in terms of citizen science. So it's really, in one way, a vital effort to go ahead and get people involved, sort of a crowdsourcing effort, to get people involved to go ahead and see from a trend viewpoint, from an analysis, all the information that comes in terms of what's happening with the environment and helping us to be more proactive in the effort to really take care of our environment in a number of ways. And by the way, so I got that right?
Absolutely, and I wanted to point out here a website. We were celebrating Earth Day at the Sands Point Preserve virtually this year because of the circumstances. But there you can see a guided, if you follow this link, so it's sandspointpreserveconservancy.org events Earth Day celebration. There's a wonderful guided walk hosted by Max Goldman. And you'll also find a webinar about citizen science right there.
Great.
And as I mentioned, plant blindness is a problem. The Wall Street Journal mentions here, you know, we don't know anymore what's in our back or front yard. And why that matters is it's simple eco-literacy, understanding what's there and why it's important, what's invasive, what's not invasive. And for understanding both flora and fauna, we have both applications like here Merlin for recognizing the birds. And then we have inaturalist.org has an application where you can record observations, share with naturalists. There's about 1 million naturalists on that application. And we discuss our findings. And right now there is something called the New York City Eco Flora Challenge. They have a specific topic So researchers at New York Botanical Gardens are studying snake root, and they're trying to understand a certain pathogen in that environment. So simple observations in your backyard, if you contribute to this, you can really be making a difference. That's just a specific that's a specific project. Just for fun, something I saw the other day is there was a simple backyard camera. A homeowner in Colorado was curious who was visiting her backyard, and she made the observation that a skunk used tools. It was the first documented case of tool use among skunks. Right here you see, that was just caught on a simple backyard camera. So, and scientists caught it on social media. And it's interesting what happens if we start paying attention and we post it. A scientist will pick it up and be like, wait a second, what's happening here, and try to make sense of it. And that's where iNaturalist comes in. So if you don't have iNaturalist yet,
I downloaded it. I got it on my phone, and I just downloaded the Merlin one. So I hate to tell you, I've been multitasking while you've been talking, but you move
that's
so quick.
wonderful.
You've got so much information in your head, Hildur. I'm trying to do a Vulcan mind meld with you very quickly while we're talking. So.
And we only have half an hour, so we need to get this all in. No.
We have to run very quickly. Let's be less mindful. Yeah.
Yes. No, I actually wanted to encourage Max right now to share his screen, because he made a finding last week that's worth mentioning in this context.
Oh, great. So Max,
yes.
your debut. You're on.
Yeah. Here we go. Yes. So this is an observation I made a few days ago. I kind of could not believe my eyes. I thought that it might have been a little dead part of this bush, but it turned out to be a monarch butterfly. And if you're unfamiliar with monarch butterflies and how they kind of do their thing, during the winter months, the ones that we see up here in southern New York are going to go all the way down to a few forested hills in the middle of Mexico. And then they slowly make their way back up when the temperatures start to warm again. And seeing this guy here so early is kind of startling, because typically in summer, they'll arrive in mid to late May, as it says in the red right here. And the issue with this is, the adult might be able to, nectar flowers that we've planted. They don't have anywhere to eggs. So monarch butterflies, they are threatened species. They're kind of struggling, and they have a very specific plant that they only lay their eggs on. They're younger, so they only go on, which is why a lot of people are to their populations to be a little bit in the future. But the issue is that there's no milkweed yet. None of the milkweed has gone where. So if this monarch were to lay eggs, there would be nowhere eggs to go. And that's really important with citizen science, because either this can be something like an outlier, somebody decided that they were going to take it into their own hands to raise some monarchs and release them maybe out of season. And by doing that, now we have this monarch here that a scientist might think is, a really stark example of how climate change is affecting how species are migrating. Or, it could be just that as well. And that's also the importance of citizen science and having a lot of people contribute, because the more data, the better. And more observations are going to allow scientists to answer more questions that they have, so they can really understand how climate change and even just human impact is affecting a lot of these different species. But it's a really fascinating thing once you look into that kind of stuff. And yeah.
Wow.
Max, for how long have you been uploading data to iNaturalist?
Probably about 3 years now. I would say that, over time you get to you learn what's more beneficial in terms of observations with the app as well. But it's really a great tool for not only you, but also scientists, because I've learned a lot from the app, because they have the species suggestions as well. And when you look at other people's observations, there's a lot of opportunities to learn and just be more mindful, help with that, what you were saying earlier, the plant, what did you say again, Hilda? When people don't know their plants?
Oh, plant blindness.
Yeah, plant blindness.
So Max, question for you. As we start taking a look at this mismatch, what does that potentially mean in terms of the overall impact to the environment as we go forward? I'm wondering, the deeper impact here. Obviously, it's climate change, but I'm just wondering, how does that impact us?
Yeah. So a lot of it is really just destabilizing, or more like changing the ecosystems that we've come to live off of. There's a lot of functions that they provide us that we often overlook. But I think probably one of the more direct impacts of this sort of mismatch would be with pollination. So because, plants have this internal clock, so they're able to kind of balance between the actual external environment and what they know inside to be the right time of year, while some other animals like pollinators might be a little bit more reliant on temperature and other, more ephemeral changes. So, with changing climate, the way that things are telling the time is going to be off. So the pollinators that we rely on for food, maybe they're going to be coming too early, and they're going to be missing the time when our crops need to be pollinated. And that's more of like a direct impact for us, but then that can also be applied to a lot of different plants that are wild and important for, almost everything in the ecosystem. Because when you tug on one little part of the ecosystem, the whole thing is going to go with it.
Yes.
Right. So this is literally the butterfly effect, and it impacts us in terms of our food sources ultimately at the end of the day, not only our food sources, but the food sources of the animal, plants, the birds, the bees, and so on. Yeah.
Yes, and if Max, if you stop the screen share, I have a slide here from David's presentation that I could pull up here about the monarch migration specifically. First of all, here is the adult monarch butterfly, and here's the caterpillar. And as Max said, this caterpillar is very specific. It's a picky eater. It will only eat milkweed leaves. So when the adult tries to lay her eggs, she's only going to go for the milkweed, because she knows that the caterpillar will only eat that. So they're monospecific in this way. So now seeing an adult monarch butterfly right now in the backyard is really concerning, because there is no milkweed yet. So we don't have so we're breaking into their life cycle of a very vulnerable population. The monarch population oscillates between endangered and threatened, and they're not doing well globally. And so this is concerning, and Max and I were here. You can see this is the egg. I have my pointer on the egg here, and these are the adults, and here is the little caterpillar. And we were concerned whether this was, well, maybe Max would speak to that. Do you think the adult made it all the way from Mexico? So what they do, this species, they actually travel thousands of miles from North America to Mexico, where they stay over winter, and then they come back. There's a migration, a fall migration pattern that then, they start returning as it warms up. So Max, would you speak to where this adult came from? Do you think this adult came from Mexico, or do you think it is another phenomenon that we discussed?
Well, so the monarchs will go down in one generation, but when they come back up, it's my understanding that they'll go kind of bit by bit. and made along the way as spring moves north, or, you know, really late spring. Yeah, and this slide really shows that here. You can see this is from Journey North. It's another citizen science project. They have the dates listed on the right side there. But, you know, if this were to be a monarch that was part of a wild population, then it would have needed, you know, there would need to be so much change along the entire migration path for that to occur. And, you know, I'm not a climate scientist, so I'm not entirely sure if that's the case, but if it is, it's pretty startling. Because as with any migratory species, you know, they're often the most hard hit with changes in climate because they rely on all these different locations from point A to point B in order to survive. And for that to be the case, like I said, I mean, it would really need to be a huge change on every step of the way.
Yeah, are you going to notify Journey North, this citizen science
Yeah.
application, of your finding?
I added it. I don't know if this, I think this is probably a little bit of an outdated photo, but I added it earlier this morning.
I like this photo. What do you think is happening here? This is where they stay over winter.
Wow.
Like leaves on a tree. It's on my bucket list to get there. Specific place in Mexico.
I have a question, and I don't mean this to be it may sound a little snarky, but I mean it in a very sincere way. What can we do, you know, since the milkweed is not rising yet? Is there any, I mean, you know, can we put out milkweed? Is there something that we can do to help these butterflies, you know, find, you know, some nourishment? Because this sounds like a very serious problem. Ultimately, it's the butterfly effect, you know,
Yes.
in some ways. So I'm wondering if there's some thought around that.
Yes, we should mention that it could be that this particular adult was a product of sort of out of season production that happens when this hobby, sometimes they're released for weddings out of season. That's really irresponsible behavior. When we're cutting into wildlife, you know, the life cycles and just raising them for, you know, for fun, right? So that's one. It's hard to tell because this particular adult wasn't marked. There is part of the Journey North Citizen Science Project is they're labeling the wings and then tracking the butterfly so that we know if they made it to Mexico and back. It's hard to tell where this particular adult came from, and hopefully it's an outlier. But if this becomes a phenomena, we will have to find the way to. I'm not quite sure how to help in this way.
Right.
Because my milkweed hasn't even broken ground yet.
Yeah, well,
So,
and ours is just thanks to you. We planted our bush this last year or the year before, but ours is just starting to bud a bit. You know,
yes.
hardly at all. So this sounds like a real potentially a real bad leading indicator, but we're hoping that it's not, and hoping that it's just one of those fanciful you know, outliers that really happens because someone decided to let their butterflies go, you know, whatever.
Max, what do you think about that? Where do you think this adult came from captivity or came from the wild?
You know, I was leaning towards the wild, and then I saw something. It was weird because it made me think, you know, whoa, maybe my phone is listening to me. Because on Instagram, I saw a post of somebody raising them inside. Not, I don't know if they were around here, but I know that, you know, they're available commercially. So maybe if somebody has kids at home, you know, maybe they're thinking, oh, this is a great time to, you know, teach my kids about the life cycle of the butterfly, which, you know, it can be. I mean, I'm okay with people doing that as long as they keep the adults inside and don't release them, because there's the issue of spreading, you know, pathogens and all these other things that could be bad for a population. But
Yes, this is a very important point. The irresponsible raising of wildlife and then introducing them into the wild. You bring a very important point, Max.
Yeah.
Well, I hope we can close that point on an up note, because we've got about 3 or 4 minutes left for our show. So is there an upside to this? And maybe we can open it up for questions if folks have questions. And how do we, I guess the question is how do we stay in open sight? How do we contribute to make sure that we understand the trend? Let me put it to you that way.
So what I would say and suggest, are you seeing my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
So one way to encourage eco-literacy, I would like to just, if we understand the natural world and its natural cycles and rhythms, we wouldn't be making mistakes in these interactions. And if you sign up for iNaturalist, it's a great way to start, to get to know the living world right in our neighborhood. And you're connecting to millions of naturalists worldwide that have made 36 million, you just saw that. Identifying species is the first step in understanding. So if you see here, and it's a way to connect to nature. So if I log in here under my alias and start sort of understanding, this particular application includes both the flora and the fauna. Max is very active on this, and then we can start understanding what's expected, what we expect to see in our environment, what's there, and with that comes once we become eco-literate, there will be less chance of irresponsible behaviors.
Great.
And anyone who understands, like in this particular case, if they had done their research and understood the migration pattern of monarchs, they wouldn't be raising them right now for releasing the adult form. And I think we have to, I am actually writing a protocol to present to our school district where we could include eco-literacy at every level, because there is a lack of understanding. There is a disconnect, right? So we need to bridge. So I think it needs to be taught starting in kindergarten, understanding, what's a responsible relationship with the living world.
I like that. I like that. And so iNaturalist is a natural place for folks to go. And then connecting with you, your connection, people can do that. Your connection is Mindful Earth Keeper. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay,
and
good.
Max, what's your name on iNaturalist?
Mine is MaxBG621. So
Max BG621. That sounds like a secret agent, Max.
Yes, he's probably the most prolific here in this area, right?
Maybe in port, but there's some heavy hitters I've seen.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So
but and on that note, I wanted to also mention here the Earth Day celebration at Sandpoint Preserve. It's online here. You can go for a guided nature walk with Max. It's on the Sandpoint Preserve Conservancy website.
And when is that available? Is that available? What day?
Yeah, you go, it's just streaming. Whenever you click, you can go for a walk. And great. It's on YouTube. So it's sandspointpreserveconservancy.org events/Earth Day celebration. That's the thread. There you can go for a guided nature walk with Max. If you're missing the Sandspoint Preserve, he'll lead you. Yep. And then we have also a webinar here that happens to be available, and it speaks to it. Yeah, here we are. It's about citizen science and how you can actually connect with citizen science
Great.
programs. It's a
So
little
you're-
webinar about
So
that.
it's right up there with the other TEDx talks that I see over on the side. That's great.
Oh, yeah.
But then from just from a resource viewpoint, that's really good. And then from a timing viewpoint, I know we're just about out of time, but we have time for one question. If there's a question from any of the listeners out there, anyone?
Oh, Meg, we have to unmute.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I
Meg?
just wanted to mention that the Dodge Farm homestead, hopefully we'll be up and running with Rewild and providing some citizen science through education. And I think it being in the middle of town here in Port Washington, it's going to be a great opportunity to spread some information about nature.
Yes.
Native, yep.
Great. So I think from the end of the day here, the main takeaway is iNaturalist to go ahead and help drive the trend, to really understand what the trends are and to contribute from a citizen science viewpoint. And then there was also Merlin, which I thought was great in terms of really understanding the birds and that's the one I'm looking forward to because I always have a little bit of trouble with that, Hildur, I have to admit that.
I had trouble with what?
With identifying all the birds that are there. Merlin was the one that I downloaded, so I'm looking forward to using that app. But Max and Hildur, thank you so much for helping to drive change in our ecology and help people be aware of the issues and really address those issues in a proactive way and be a part of the change, not a part of the problem. So
exactly, and I'd like to end actually with really thanking Max. It's been such an inspiration to work with him, and he's headed to college hopefully in the fall. In which you're signed up for what program, Cornell?
It's the Agriculture and Life Sciences School.
Yeah, so I would like to acknowledge that you're a senior right now, and this is not a typical year. But
no.
he's very aware of the changes that are happening, and I would like to end the program with saying the future is in good, able hands, because the young people I've met here they seem very aware and educated.
I totally endorse that and applaud you, Max, for what you're doing and the work that you're doing and the vision that you have. It's inspirational, and we need more of that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So at that, we'll conclude the show and look forward to next week. And next week will be another series in your environment now. And do we have any thoughts about that, Hildur, or are you just, we're waiting to see what that happens with that?
What I would like to continue the citizen science conversation, and there is a challenge going on. If you Google the nature challenge at iNaturalist is now worldwide, communities are contributing to the database. So if there is interest, we can go over that
Great.
data.
The nature challenge. And in the meantime, if people want to get a hold of you, how would they do that, Hildur? It's
Hildur at sol.center, CENTER.
Okay, so Hildur, HILDUR, at sol.center, CENTER. Perfect.
Yes, and I'm
Excellent.
happy to guide with anything to do with logging on and using iNaturalist.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And thank you, Max, and everyone for joining us. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you, Keith, for having us.